but his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as a fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Where's my volume? There we go. All right. We're continuing today in the book of Genesis, chapter 31. We're picking up at 43, and you remember, I'm just going to recap so we don't read the whole chapter because we're going to read back into the next chapter. And Jacob has just blown his top at Laban over the treatment he's had over the past 20 years. And especially now after having, Jacob finally decides he's had enough. He's leaving. He leaves without telling Laban, which offends Laban, understandably on some level, but of course, completely without merit due to the fact that he well knows the way he's treated Jacob. And now in his pursuit, he's also quite hot in his pursuit, which Jacob points out, you've hotly pursued me. And he had explained his perspective on things. And the Lord having appeared to Laban in a dream to temper his approach. So he comes to Jacob for Laban in a position of, let's say, neutrality. I think perhaps asking Laban to abase himself before Jacob might be a bit much. As far as for Laban, it would be a big ask. He'd probably just end up dead at the hand of the Lord. Because sometimes, that's one of the things to remember, that the Lord does not, if he wanted to destroy us, he could ask more than we could handle. But because he is merciful, as he offers with every temptation a way to escape. We have opportunity to escape the temptations that befall us. Laban here is in temptation. He's greedy. He wants something from his son-in-law. He wants the riches that Jacob has amassed now for himself back to Laban. And so we're just going to pick up in the story right here at verse 43 and read into chapter 32 instead of the whole chapter, just because it is a long chapter and we have covered it extensively. So Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made a heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha. All right, whatever, that was pretty bad. But Jacob called it Gilead, which I think it differs nothing from Gilead. We'll find out in a minute. And Laban said, this heap is a wilderness, a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore is the name of it called Gilead. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said unto Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered sacrifice on the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread, and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban arose up, and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned to his place. And Jacob went on his way, and the angel of God met him. And the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's host." And he called the name of the place Mahanaim. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. And Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother, unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, "Thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau. Thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants, and I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight." And the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, "We came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him." Then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed, and he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks and herds and camels, into 2 bands. And he said, "If Esau come to the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape." And Jacob said, "O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which sayest unto me, Return to thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not worthy of the least of all thy mercies, and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I'm become 2 bands. Deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me, and the mother with the children. And thou saidest, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude." And he lodged there the same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother: 200 she-goats, and 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine and 10 bulls, 20 she-asses and 10 foals. And he delivered them to the hand of his servants, every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, Pass over before me, and put a space between drove and drove. And he commanded the foremost, saying, When Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, Whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, Thee be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the droves, saying, On this manner shall ye speak to Esau, when ye find him. And say moreover, Behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face, peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. And he rose up that night, and took his 2 wives, and his 2 women servants, and his 11 sons, and passed over the ford Jabbok. And he took them, and sent them over the brook, and sent over that he had. And Jacob was left alone. And there wrestled a man with him until the breaking of day. And when he saw that he prevailed not against him, he touched the hollow of his thigh. And the hollow of Jacob's thigh was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, Let me go, for the day breaketh. And he said, I will not let thee go, except thou bless me. And he said unto him, What is thy name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, Thy name shall be no more called Jacob, but Israel. For a prince hast thou power with God and with men. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, Tell me, I pray thee, thy name. And he said, Wherefore is it that thou dost ask after my name? And he blessed him there. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. And he passed over Penuel, and the sun rose upon him, and he halted upon his thigh. Therefore the children of Israel eat not of the sinew which shrank, which is upon the hollow of the thigh, unto this day, because he touched the hollow of Jacob's thigh in the sinew that shrank. Not sure what that is medically. I mean, I know it's the thigh, the inside of the thigh, the tenderloin. I think that is actually the tenderloin on the cow, as far as anatomically. You know, it's that there is a understanding in the scripture that humans and animals share common anatomy. You know, they don't eat of that same place off the animal, and that same place exists. I said, and people say, well, that's because we have a common ancestor. I'm like, it's more likely because we have a common design. Okay, so we're back into 31. That is a lot. That chapter is really exciting and interesting. So in 43, Laban says, these daughters are my daughters. Now, at first I thought maybe he was being covetous, but I think what he's saying is basically, you know, Jacob's very angry. And he's saying, all this belongs to me in the sense of, what can I do unto these my daughters? You know, what would what do you think I'm going to do? Hurt my daughters? Take away the blessings of theirs, which are mine, I guess? You know, Jacob accused him, you had sent me away now empty. I think he's saying, what are you saying? All that you have comes from me. Okay? Whatever you want to say, these cattle are my cattle. You got them from me. I paid you with them, even though I tried not to pay you. Okay. Even though he tried not to do it. Technically, those are the cattle with which he paid Jacob. You know what I mean? So he's got a point there. Not that he owns them so much as, this is from me. Everything you have is from me. And what could I do against what is my own? And so what he's saying is, I think he's trying to say, like, I never had... Remember, most of the thoughts that he would take it by violence are coming from Jacob. It's not clear that Laban intended him harm. He probably intended to bring him back by some means. And I think through his usual sleazy ways. You know, Jacob doesn't, to me, feel like a guy who is much for violence and force. You know, but, you know, he certainly will try to pressure Jacob, you know, but the Lord has already intervened. So whatever Jacob was planning, or Laban was planning, it matters not, because the Lord had set that vision or that dream that prevented him from carrying out anything in particular. It was like kind of like he just said, you better come, don't speak good or evil. And, you know, and I think that basically, and like I said, with a view to bringing him back. Don't try to bring him back. Don't you speak to him good or bad. Don't threaten him. Don't bribe him. Because remember, the Lord has sent Jacob back. And Laban's interfering. It reminds me a lot of when Balaam pursued the children of Israel. Or when the children of Israel are coming out and Balaam besought Balak to cast a stumbling block before the children of Israel. Right? And he, on his way to do this foul deed, the Lord intercedes. In some ways showing, hey, the God doesn't hate Laban. Because if he hated Laban, he could just slay him in the night. You know? Like he threatened to do Balak. The only thing sparing Balak being the wisdom of his ass. Whom, you know, and obviously the Lord giving him mercy there and allowing the ass to see the angel, and also to speak to Balak. And people would say like, oh, didn't have the mouth parts. It doesn't need mouth parts. A voice could just emanate from the ass. It doesn't matter. In the spirit, it can speak to him. It's weird. You don't have to actually hear a voice to think something can talk. You know what I'm saying? Like, because of the mind. You've never heard sounds that weren't there? You never had a dream? You know, I have dreams that have sound and light and vision and all that stuff. I mean, just regular dreams. So, I mean, it's no great thing if a ass should speak. I mean, like, to get you to hear it is not, because like I've often said, it's like a lot of miracles, it's obvious from the context. They only occur for some of the people in the place. For example, when the voice came out of heaven that spoke to him when he was knocked off the horse and blinded, or ass, whatever he was riding, when he was knocked down and blinded on the road to Damascus, he heard a voice very clear, but other people said it thundered. They thought maybe there was a rumble or something. They didn't hear this voice. They heard something. And maybe some people heard nothing. That has happened. So it's like, God communicates through dreams, something that other people don't see. So it's possible to have communication from God that is not through an audible voice and other things, And it's possible for you to mistake such things. A dream cometh forth from the multitude of business. So you have to use a hefty amount of discernment. Obviously, if, I don't have a lot of dreams with like God coming and telling me stuff. I only had one dream like that exactly. I think I've related it on several occasions, and I don't need to relate it now. And it was very vague in some ways. I had a dream where demons spoke to me. I think more than once. Yeah. And I, as far as what is the reality of that? Well, doesn't happen every day. Out of the multitude of business comes forth a dream, but that doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything. Because like I said, look at the multitude of Laban's business is chasing after Jacob, and he gets a dream. And he's not even a man of God. He worships idols. Or at least he certainly does not. This is the Bronze Age, so they're like, oh, these are my gods and your gods and everybody's gods. And, there's not, a lot of the knowledge of God that would have been known from the original creation is completely muddled. They know somewhat of God, just like Paul said. They know about God. But the problem is men in their hearts reject God. That which may be known of God is manifest in us, at least in some portion, and we reject it. Maybe not consciously. You know what I mean? Not consciously, but when we lie, we know, and we know what the truth is. God is the truth. There's no lying in him. It's not that God doesn't make a world in which lying is possible. He's raising up sons. And in that, just like, I don't try to raise my children in a way that it's impossible for them to sin. That's a mission doomed to failure. And that's what you see. I think a lot of times, I remember cliches from like the Church of England, for like in British TV shows and stuff. I remember they would have like the parents basically trying to keep their kids from doing anything sinful, and if you do that, you're going to burn in hell. And it's such a weird way, because it's like, that's not how the gospel is never preached that way. And if you don't understand that you didn't give birth to an angel, you gave birth to a human. And so children, you want to teach them the right ways and give them an environment in which you can foster the right thing. If you're genuinely trying to raise up your children, not just abandon if they're indeed yours. I mean, it's like, you're going to take responsibility for these. But anyways, like Laban is saying, these are my children. I would never do anything to harm them. And by implication, or you. These are my daughters and what could I do to them? Again, well, maybe drag them back to, willingly or unwillingly back to Padanaram. Who knows? They're 7 days away. Now therefore come and let's make a covenant. Let's make an agreement. Me and you. It'll be for a witness between me and you. So Jacob takes a stone and sets it up for a pillar. Now, he had done this for Jacob's pillar. I don't know if is it the same pillar or just a random one. I think, it doesn't specify that it was the same one, so I would not assume that. Unless you have something specific, you can't just go around assuming every rock is the same thing. Because I remember, in fact, in reading the book Jacob's Pillar, it's been many years, and unfortunately I gave it away. I kind of wish I had that stuff back, actually, because it was interesting, and I would like to address it and why, the pros and cons, like I do with a lot of things, with interpretations of the beginning of Genesis, and with things like this. I wish I could say more about it, but like I said, I read that book probably 25 years ago. That's why, I wish I could brush it up. But it is implied that this stone is not only Jacob's pillar, the original one, but also the rock that followed them in the wilderness was actually, they took Jacob's pillar with, and that was the particular rock that Moses smote. Now, it doesn't say, though. And, and it's a strange thing to me that, like, they would want to pursue this rock in the carnal thing as if it was a special rock, much like an idol, honestly. When we know from the New Testament what Paul taught was that rock was Christ. So, yes, the rock and the stones, you could say they're the same stones. You know what I mean? He sleeps on that stone and he sees the angels ascending and descending. He rests in Christ and he has a vision of the heavenly. Right? He takes up Christ to make peace with his enemy. That rock that followed them was Christ. It wasn't the coronation stone of the King of England. I mean, maybe it was, but I'm just saying that's not what Paul said. And if it is a truth, it's a hidden truth. Because even in Genesis, they never connect these stones. It's done by people going through the Bible and picking out these little incidents with rocks and basically saying it's all the same rock. It's this rectangular prism-shaped rock. It's a pretty regular rectangle. If you've ever seen I bet you could look it up on the internet. I can't because I don't have internet anymore. I have my phone, but I can't show it on the screen, and I'm not gonna do it right now. I'm actually just remembering to open up I just want to make sure I have. Oh, don't do that. There we go. I just want to make sure I have good old Bible Hub ready to go, because I know there's something we're gonna look up. Oh, there it is. I kept it open in a tab. Cool. I probably should just use their app. That's right, I have their app. Oh boy, Paul. Isn't it lovely watching? It's like real life. You just watch people flip through their darn phones. Yeah, where's my Bible Hub app? They didn't put it right out there for me. Of course not. It's like the apps they want. Oh, there we go. The apps they want me to use are just everywhere. Okay. And it's not a bad app. It seems fine to me, It gives me... It's probably easier to use in the online version, I guess. Though I never had a problem with that. And I love having the Bible at my fingertips. It's kind of cool. Having something like this. Oops. All right, there we go. So I'll make sure we're in the right. Should have... Paul, why are you doing this in front of everybody? Come on, buddy. All right. Only because I can do it with a constant thing of banter that makes it at least not horribly boring. All right. So Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. So he takes one stone, sets it up for a pillar. For a pillar. I wonder if there's anything special about that word pillar, huh? Let's see. What verse are we on? Verse 45. Because he's setting up, okay, I think immediately, okay, it's a standing stone. Now, standing stones are very often parts of really pagan practices. And in some ways, they're making of covenants. Like I say, this is their customs. It's not customs that God imposes on people from the top down, as far as I can tell. What I see here is God participating in what people do. As far as like when he made the covenant with Jacob, or when Abraham passed through the pieces of meat, he did tell him to do it. But like I said, I believe that is because that is the custom and something that Abraham can understand. because, okay, now, and I noticed, see now I can see here, unfortunately in my text version, I don't have the good old italics to let me know which words were added. And it says for in brackets, which means they may not be, and the only definition we got, this is a pillar, oh, you can't see anything. From natsab, a pillar or stump. Translated obelisks, pillars, or stump. A stone set up, especially sacred stones or pillars in connection with an altar. But this whole description reminds me of Jacob's altar on Mount Ebal. You know what I really love about the new thing is I can just, if I wanted to, I could just go, Jacob's altar on Mount Ebal. And I bet I'll get a picture of it. It actually read it as saying, get a picture of it. Images. Oh, wow. But it reminds me of, if you look up Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, there's a lot of cool pictures of it. I mean, you won't be able to see them on my phone, right? Yeah. But you can look up those pictures, and I should get some. But it's made of all these stones heaped up. So when they gathered stones here, it was probably a significant gathering of stones. And, and unless they were later on used for some other purpose, they may still even be there to be excavated. Who knows? Because like I said, they didn't find Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal, which mainstream archaeology denies. And, I have respect for science and stuff, but, I read from cover to cover. It's one of the last books I read before I started getting into audiobooks. Forbidden Archaeology, which goes and documents how things were with the medical establishment, how from the top down, there's like this syndicate that lies and does things for their own interest or for the interest of corporations. And they collude with the government to create this kind of fascism that we're living under now, from the medical establishment. Well, there's kind of a fascist, archaeological establishment also, where it's all top down and controlled. If you find evidence outside of the mainstream, you will be suppressed. Your evidence will be suppressed. Your reputation will be destroyed. So, while I have no respect or very little, I respect Ken Ham in the gospel of Jesus when he's true to that. But I gotta tell you, like the other day, I get a video recommended, and of course, why are people leaving the church? What is it? Why are we young people turning from God? And what is his answer? Well, like always, it's answers in Genesis. You've got to believe that the earth is if we don't start teaching people that the earth is only 6,000 years old and all this Ken Ham creationism stuff, we got to focus on that, and that'll bring people back to the church. That's literally his solution to every problem. And, boy, could you be more wrong? I don't think so. I don't think so. That's not it's because we focus on things other than the truth. We focus on proving our own interpretations and getting involved in petty garbage like that instead of bringing to light the true glory of the gospel and of the what is laid before us, the tremendous, the riches, what is the word I'm looking for? What was that? But the riches and treasures that there are in the Lord, in the calling of God, that, it's something for a man to aspire to, but we give them nothing to aspire to except to accept things, except we're going to fight about things that are very sketchy, having to do with our interpretation of how long the earth has been here. And that's going to be the basis on bringing people back to Jesus. Well, you know what? You're wrong. Gosh, just absolutely couldn't be more wrong. I'm like, boy, that's the answer to every question. It's like, what do we do to create revival in the country? Well, we got to go back and start teaching them the earth is 6,000 years old. That's what's going to do it. Yeah, right. I'm so buying that. Anyways, and that also makes it, and again, the presence of charlatans and, I don't want to call him a charlatan, but it's like, I don't know, when you're so destructive, what do you call that? I don't know. I guess that wood, hay, stubble problem we got, right? All these works being done that are just going to burn up on the altar into nothing. I mean, there's no value in it. All you're doing is creating confusion and driving people away. You know, open up and take an honest look at things. Be honest with God. You know, we always got, everyone's, oh, we got to stay fat. I mean, it's like, it becomes like that obsession with tradition. Well, this is the way we've always interpreted things. Okay. So they gathered stones into a heap. And I think this is significant. Not just like a little pile of rocks. Like, I would think they'd gathered it together to make a platform with a stone in the middle. I mean, maybe not a huge platform, but I think if it was written of like this, it's not just like, let's take a few rocks into like a small cairn. They bring some stones together for something significant. And like I said, if you consider all the animals Jacob has, and like I said, his brethren, well, these are the servants that he's obtained. It doesn't say exactly how he's obtained them, but I can figure it. You know, when he's making money for Laban and getting like his own cattle, in his prosperity, he's obtaining things and trading for things. He's got, you know, over the past 20 years, he hasn't been idle. But for the, you know, for the most part, for the first 14, nothing he had belonged to him. But for the last 6, it did. So that's the 6 years is when he amassed all this wealth that we're going to see in the next chapter, right? We already read about it. He's got these, you know, when you can give such gifts and then you have people driving the gifts ahead, those are your servants. So, I mean, as far as Jacob has, it didn't spell out, you know, it wasn't like, all we know is that it was that last 6 years. Because when he fled, it seemed like he went empty-handed. He didn't bring like a retinue. I mean, he might have had some sort of retinue, right? I mean, like, because to even travel, he would have had some stuff with him. I thought he just walked out naked. You know, he departed. But anyways, he called it Jegar Sahadutha. That one, I don't know what that means. But it's going to be something like, I don't know. I know the meaning of the other words, obviously. Galid, in the context, obviously meaning a witness. And then Mizpah being a watchtower. Very often, there were several places of that name. So, what does this Gabozlabaldu mean? What was it? Jegar Sahadutha. Jegar da Sahadutha. It means, oh shoot. No, not that one. Okay. Yegar Sahadutha. Heap of the testimony. Okay, it means heap of the testimony. He gave it a descriptive term, but Jacob called it Galid, a witness, which I believe is the same as Gilead. Let me look that up real quick. I've been saying that. I just want to make sure I got that right. I gotta say in the app. I'm not sure whether to double tap things or if okay, that's good enough. Galed, a proper name, location, witness pile, a memorial of stones east of the Jordan River. So, wait a second. Galed, no, this only occurs twice. So it's not Gilead, which is, you know, where they're near. This is Galid, which is just similar sounding. So it's different. So that is not the same as Gilead, even though it's in the same area. Okay. And Mizpah, I don't need to look that up. That means watchtower or watch. And he says, the Lord watch between me and you. This heap is a witness. You know, and then this is what, you know, Laban calls on Jacob's God because he knows that's who has spoken to him and that's who Jacob is following. But he says, if thou shalt afflict my daughters, this, I think it's a bit thin. But because he's trying to justify why he's there, right? We know why he's there. But he wants to say, it was my daughter. I was concerned about the girls. It's like, he knows how to put on the right show. It's like he's a bit of a sleaze, but all right. But also, he knows what sounds right, at the very least. And it may not be entirely, I don't think he's void of affection. But, his greed is his first loyalty is to his stomach, unfortunately. Mitzpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee. Jacob called it Gilead because of what Laban said. And Laban says, if thou shalt afflict my daughters or take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness between me and thee. I'm calling out, if you do anything, if you take other wives, meaning that my daughters will become like not so important. They are your chief wives. And also because, he sees Jacob is just blessed by this God, by this Yahweh. And so he could see him getting more riches and more wives and who knows what else. I mean, the Lord himself calls him a prince. So there's no man here. God is witness. There's no man between us to make this promise sure. Because you could have a covenant that was witnessed by a man. And very often this is how we do it, right? We have witnesses to contracts. And they should be preferably, it should be witnessed by neutral parties. Ideally. That's what arbitration is about. Though it's also what going to court is about, right? You sign a contract between two parties, and then you go to some man, and that man is going to determine if someone has departed from the contract, and if there are penalties in the contract, they may have to be either just voluntarily complied with, or you have to bring the law in to enforce the whatever clauses have been invoked by the breach of contract. And just to be general about it. But there are remedies when we break contract, and we usually look to men. Well, Laban is saying, look, there's no man here. This is not a contract witnessed by men, but by God. And in this, I'm sure Laban is sincere as far as the one thing that I think he's most sincere about here is when he says, you will not pass over this heap or this pillar unto me for harm. So I'm not going to come to you. I'm not going to move to Canaan for any reason, apparently. And he's saying, Jacob, don't you come to me for harm. He leaves open the door. If you want, you can pass to me for good. I don't see the harm part. He didn't apply the harm part for himself. Because probably he didn't want to imply that he ever intended harm. But he also fears Jacob. And because God has blessed him. And he knows, so do not pass over this to me for harm. But you may come back to bless me, of course. If you want to come back and work for me, you're more than welcome to. I think that's also implied. That that Jacob could come back to Padan Aram, but he would swear that it would not be to hurt him. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father. And who's the God of their father? Serug. Was it Serug? Whatever. Of their father, Adam. Serug. I forgot what name. Terah. That's Abraham's father. Or grandfather. I used to have that memorized, but I don't. Don't anymore. Because you have to keep that information refreshed. I'm like, and what am I trying to do? Just impress everybody? Look at all the factoids he knows. There are people who are great with that because they have a gift. Am I pretending to have that gift? I don't have that gift. I've got a different gift. My gift is my gift. I wish I had a guy. It'd be cool to sit next to someone who had like one of those he can remember all that stuff. I actually do know someone who can remember all that stuff. which is really cool. But you got to have a reason to pull it out, right? So that's the thing, is like, it becomes sort of like, well, great, thanks for the information. Oh, it's like, but in the midst of it, it's great when you can. But, like I said, we don't all have all gifts. I'm not going to sit here and pretend to have a greater gift than I do. I think the gifts of God are all great. Even the lesser gifts. We should not despise small things. And that doesn't mean that, like, it's going anywhere. It's not meant to be, someone pointed out to me that actually, when you talk about despising small things, you're talking about big deals. Because people often despise the work of the Lord because it's small, but it turns into something, the work of God is significant. I don't deny that anything I do is significant. That's why my study is for one person, not one specific person, but that there be one person is all I require to continue teaching. I don't require a lot of people. I don't require a big ministry. It's not important. That part's not important. The being big is not important. What's important is being faithful. That's important. If you're faithful in that which is least, you will be also faithful in that which is greater. I only mean despising small things when I say, like, that I should despise the seemingly narrow scope of my work. Why should I would despise it? It's not and I'm saying, don't think it doesn't tempt me. I may be acting like, oh, I love the narrow. It's like, not that I have a very, I would say, realistic understanding of what that would all mean. I certainly don't crave a larger ministry. On some level, I would feel that it testified that I was doing the right thing, right? But really, would it? Is that because it's like, do men with big ministries, are they invariably doing the right thing? You know what I mean? No, they're not invariably doing the right thing. Maybe the Lord prefers, think about all the thousands of people that don't know about me. We're among the thousands of people that don't know about the other guys. The Lord has reserved himself 7,000 men that have not bowed the knee to Baal. Okay, so they make this, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us, and Jacob swear by the fear of his father Isaac. That's the second reference to that concept, the fear of Isaac. And I wasn't sure if he means, like I said, there's two ways I see of interpreting that. I'm not sure which one is stronger. I think myself, my gut is that it's more morally right to fear God, and that the fear of Isaac refers to the fear of God. But I look at my own children, I understand that as they come into their own, and Jacob is a bit, in some ways spiritually, still an adolescent. And I don't mean that to be insulting, but, God hasn't given him the fullness. I mean, God's about to wrestle with him, right? So there's still some growing that he's got to do, right? He's not fully grown up any more than I am. I'm not fully grown up. Even though I may understand more than he did. Certainly at this point, right? Because I know the end of his story, and he doesn't. I know where things are going, and he doesn't. So yeah, that's no big deal. Hindsight is 20/20. That's one of my dad's favorite sayings. The fear of Isaac. I do see it as also this, that one of the things in Christianity I believe in. I remember I was exposed to this evangelical covenant church, right? And they were saying that, they had some belief about, that the gospel was also for their children somehow in some sort of covenant relationship. I don't get all technical about it, but I remember that, and I remember thinking, I don't know. I didn't know. But then I had children, and I continued to study the Bible, and I kind of saw what I thought they were on about. I don't know if this has any bearing to the actual denomination, but they were the ones who introduced me to that thought. And I go trace it to where Paul starts talking about, being married to an unbeliever, and how your children are sanctified because of your faith. And I was like, the sanctification. What does this sanctification mean? I mean, it has to be worth something to them. Being born, it's like being born a Jew in the time of Paul. There were certain advantages conveyed. What advantage then hath the Jew? Well, chiefly that to them were committed the oracles of God. But to them pertain the promises, to them pertained all, they have all these things, and basically by a birthright. And it seems like Paul believes that the children of Christians, in as much as we are grafted into the family of Israel, whether the Jews understand this or not, but it is true because Christ has broken down the wall of separation and destroyed the enmity which exists between Jew and Gentile, at least within the church, at least within those who are truly in Christ. You can't be in Christ and feel animosity towards the Jews, by the way. If you hate Jews, you're not a Christian. You say, well, they're not really Jews. Well, you're not really a Christian. You're not really a Christian, because a Jew is not one which is one outwardly, but which is one inwardly. And there are lots of Jews who love Jesus, and they are certainly my brethren, and they are ethnically Jewish and could be considered to be sons of the devil by those who get caught up in these myths that have very little substantiation in Scripture. And you can pick out verses and say, oh, see here and see there, but there's no connecting tissue. Where's all the connecting tissue? The story of the Bible is the story of the Bible. I mean, you read it and there's a story. People want to say, well, that's not the real story. Underneath there's like, I got a verse here, I got a verse there, and let me fill in all this stuff in between about, where Satan's children hijacked on the ark. You might as well go watch the Russell Crowe movie where like they're hijacking the ark, and yeah. And in some ways that is what is required, as far as, we know that we don't understand how the story fits into the real world. I don't. Because I do believe the story of Noah and the ark. I believe the testimony, because the Lord himself, but again, when he references Noah, I could reference Luke Skywalker. It doesn't make him real. Yeah, just because I could say, you remember when Luke Skywalker cut off that creature's arm or something? No, that was Han Solo. Whatever. You reference some movie as though it's real. And I believe in Noah. I tend to. I still default believe it happened. But I'm never entirely at peace with all my doubts. I believe the Lord. The Lord chose people like Thomas and me and Peter, and so that we would understand that it's not like just lights out for us because we have a few doubts. I trust the Lord chiefly. A lot of the things I don't understand, I try not to lean on my own understanding. Fortunately, in order to walk with God, you don't have to have it. We don't. Like I said, Ken Ham is wrong. He's wrong. The reason this generation is falling away from God is not because the churches aren't teaching his view of Genesis. That's not the problem. And I think it's kind of narcissistic for him to think that. And to keep on the face of so much evidence, to keep putting forward an interpretation that is not required by anything internal in the Scripture. There's no reason that you have to stick with that. Okay, so he offered sacrifice, called his brethren to eat bread. Remember, we talked about the brethren. We were wondering who these brethren were. And like I said, I think when you look ahead and it says he delivered them in the hands of his servants, these servants are kind of his people, his bros, so to speak. They work for him. Like I said, are they slaves? They're his servants. They work for him. They don't work for anybody else. Could they leave? Probably. Would they leave? Probably not. Again, you got to understand the nature of these things. Human relationships are complicated. You can be a servant and live and maybe, kind of not with like extra pay, but you're just there and you work for the boss. It's like, servants often ran off. The law had a fugitive slave law. I actually finally saw someone talking about that. I think it was Dennis Prager brought up the part about the fugitive slave law, because I've been pounding that drum for years. When they talk about slavery in the Bible, look at the way the Bible regulates slavery. It's like it doesn't ban it. It's like that was again, God doesn't ask more than we are able to bear. Just like divorce. God doesn't like divorce, but Jesus explains, but God did this for the hardness of your hearts. That's why there are, you know why there are laws governing slavery in the Bible? Because if he banned it, they would just give him the middle finger. I was about to flick off the camera because that's the kind of person I am. But, if he said you can't have slaves, it is implied from the laws governing slavery that slavery is an evil. Just as divorce is an evil. There are laws governing these things, not because they're good, because they're bad, and because of the hardness of the hearts of men. Men will sell each other. Men will, in a lot of slavery, honestly, had to do with debt, especially if you look at the law. And of course, war captives are another matter. War captives are indeed slaves, chattel slaves. And like I said, if you're not allowed to keep slaves, you know what happens? All those war captives become war dead. Right? And that's all that's what people do. It's for the hardness of our hearts. If God won't let men take slaves from their war captives, they will surely slaughter every single person. That's what people do. And so so when he gave Moses the law, like Jesus, Moses wrote this, Moses wrote a lot of the law with God's, let's say, seal of approval. That's the way it's related. So they eat and drink. That's the feasting, is the making of the covenant. Eating and drinking. Just like, and where are they eating and drinking? Before the rock, before Christ. We eat and drink Christ to live. And someone was recently saying that they felt the communion was essential. And I don't, if someone feels that the ritual is not insignificant, especially when you take it up in faith. If you take up the ritual in faith, then I don't deny, I don't think anyone really believes that it's literally the corpuscles of Christ, as I used to joke. But in a spiritual sense, is that the body and blood of Christ? If you, as part of your faith, will go to a Catholic church and take these things at the hand of the priest. If you do so with a clean conscience and faith toward God, yes, that is his blood. That is his body. And for me, I think of it in metaphorical, spiritual. If you want to think that means literal, well, it's literally spiritually true. That's why I look at it. But I don't condemn anyone for doing those things in faith and taking on those actions. Certainly, though I'm very critical, obviously, of the hierarchy of every denomination in church and of the structure of that. The rituals that we do in the name of Christ, I don't see them in and of themselves as being anything wrong with them. It's certainly not things like ritualistically repeating the Last Supper, which, with the Lord's Supper, as they call it, right? That's what they call Holy Communion. So I do not, while I emphasize the spiritual aspects of this, which you must have, you cannot merely go through the motions. I think this is understood, right? We can't just go through the motions and say, oh, that is I'm eating and drinking his body and blood. You can't just do that. We have to do that in faith, meaning that is part of our consuming Christ that we might live. Meaning we do this in remembrance of him. We don't just do this in remembrance of an obligation. It is Christ, because like I said, the point is to know who he is and to be, to render ourselves obedient to the calling which he has called us with. And two, the faith of Jesus. And there's a lot to that. So it can't be merely the practice of that. But if you think that practice is essential, then go ahead and do it. It's just like baptism. I agree. You technically don't have to be baptized. But should you? Sure, if you have opportunity. Should you take communion? If you have opportunity, yes. I've had communion in the ritualistic sense. But to me, my faith dictates that this is a greater communion. When I commune with the Holy Spirit and I live of him, that means a daily commitment to Christ, the way I commit to food. That means to consume of Jesus, of his teachings, of his wisdom, of his spirit. I have to imbibe that daily and it has to daily sustain me. And if I add on top of that a ritual that signifies it, that only strengthens it if it's done in faith. In faith. Everything done in faith. Whatsoever is not of faith, right, is sin. We can eat and drink damnation. That's what it says. He that eat and drinks the Lord's body unworthily. That's the point. It's like, I'm focused on, let's be worthy. Let's do the things that make us worthy of that. And when we are worthy of that, we know we eat it for real and not just we're pretending, oh, this is my, the Lord's body, the Lord's blood. And I go back to my job and I go back to my life. And who is the Lord? I don't even know. Obviously people who listen to this study and, like I said, there's, I'm referring to a writing someone wrote to me, and they'll probably listen to this and understand what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you understand what I'm talking about, because communion is a subject. Eating and drinking, it's so, like I said, when they eat bread to solidify the covenant, and that's true, is to solidify your faith in Christ, you must eat and drink him, because his flesh is meat indeed. His blood is drink indeed. And, I talked about that extensively in my study on John. I do emphasize the spiritual, but I don't want to degrade the partaking of it that way, because the Lord himself did so literally. He literally broke bread and gave it to them and said, do this. So if you interpret that as to let me do that exactly so, I don't think I should. If I've said things in the past against it, I don't know that I spoke against it, have I? I think I've always maintained, just like baptism and stuff, that it's like we must, I don't know, not just like baptism, but I've said, but the outward expression of something that's a ritual is, like Jesus said, it behooves us to fulfill all righteousness. It's not an unrighteous thing to imitate something the Lord did, even if it's just an outward imitation of something he did. Like when people walk the road to, like on Easter in Jerusalem, there will be people carrying crosses from the place where it was believed he was scourged to the place where they believed he was crucified. I don't know the provenance of these things, but where it is believed, where we believe, And there's nothing, even though I don't think like we have to do that, I don't think there's anything wrong with people doing that. They probably, unless they're just doing it like to do it, to make a show. That, I think, is a problem, and that is left to every man. We should not judge our brethren. If I've judged the brethren in the past, I don't think I've ever said that doing the outward expression of communion was a bad thing. So, well, we already read 32, but since we got a couple minutes left, I don't think there's much to say about it, about Mahanaim. Which meant what? It probably means this is God's host, but it's not, the word God is not in there. So it's probably like a host is in it or something like that. I'm going to look that up real quick. I feel so stupid with the phone. So the angels that meet him. And then we're going to pick it up at verse 3, by the way, next time. Because like I said, that's where we're going to read the whole chapter 32, which we've already read, but it's worth reading again. I liked previewing that helped me really finish out that last chapter in many ways, because I understood now who Jacob's brethren were, right? Oop, that's too far. I need the next chapter. All right. Oh, this is a long chapter. I'm scrolling through. I'm like, no wonder it takes me so long to read this chapter. Okay, first verse. Mahanaim. That's plural, I know that. Oh, 2 camps. A place east of the Jordan. So there's 2. It says the angels of God met him, and he saw them and said, this is God's host, and he called the place Mahanaim, 2 camps. And so he sees God's host, and he has his own host, right? And I think that's where he gets the idea. He's coming to meet you with 400 men. You know? And then he divides the people into two bands. So I think this vision, or whatever, the angels of God met him. And when he saw them, he said, this is God's host. And he called the name of the place Mahanaim. So the angels of God have met him. I remember when my old teacher used to teach this chapter, at least the time I remember, he didn't care for the way Jacob tried to butter up Esau. I mean, I don't think he thought, but he saw it as him trying to butter him up, and he's right. Whether he should or shouldn't have, I don't know. But it seems like the Lord sends, I don't know, between the angel host coming here to sort of make a bit of a showing, a show of force. I mean, the angels of God meeting him on the way. You know, when Abraham went, there weren't angels of God. The Lord appeared to him in different places, but it wasn't like this host and all this. And it's interesting. And then the wrestling that comes. Well, we'll talk about that next time because I've got to go. So thanks for joining me in this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow. It's going to be another pre-recorded study. I really have no idea when I'm going to be back live. It's got some major problems, and you know, I can't explain it. All right, thanks for joining me. I'd rather not explain it.
But his hand is stretched out still. For wickedness burneth as a fire, it shall devour the briars and thorns, and shall kindle in the thickets of the forest, and they shall mount up like the lifting up of smoke. Through the wrath of the Lord of hosts is the land darkened, and the people shall be as the fuel of the fire. No man shall spare his brother.